Algebra 2, target 4. I can graph a quadratic equation. Today, our focus is on standard form. Now, standard form for a quadratic, like standard form for anything else, you want your powers in decreasing order and all like terms combined. So, what we got for standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c, something you should be pretty familiar with. Now, there's a couple things we can tell by standard form. Not a lot we can tell just by looking at it, but we can more tell by doing some quick calculations or manipulations. One thing we can tell just by looking at it is we know if it opens up or down. Just like before, if A is positive, it opens up like a cup. If A is negative, it opens down like a frown. Another thing we can tell by looking at it, we can tell based on how large A is or how close to 0 A is, how wide it is or how narrow it is. The further from 0 A is, the steeper it is. It's going to move very quickly. The closer to 0 it is, it's going to be very wide. Another thing we can tell just by looking at it is we know the y-intercept is c, right? Because it's added on. Everything else is 0. Whatever's added on, that's your y-intercept. Now, with a little manipulation, we can quickly see the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is at negative b over 2a. And that should look familiar to you because that's part of the quadratic equation that you learned in Algebra 1. You can tell the axis of symmetry is negative b over 2a. That gives us the x-coordinate of our vertex. And of course, to find the y, you're going to do some plug and chug. All right, so let's look at an example. We have the graph, y equals 2x squared minus 8x plus 6. A couple things we can tell right away. We know our coordinate, or our coefficients, are 2, negative 8, and 6. We can tell by looking at it that it opens up like a cup because a is 2. It's also pretty far from 0, so this is going to be a rather skinny graph. Right? We can quickly calculate the vertex by finding the axis of symmetry. Our axis of symmetry is negative b over 2a, so that's negative 8, which is 8, over 2 times 2, which is 4. So our axis of symmetry is at 2, x equals 2. Okay, and we can plug and chug to find out the y-coordinate of the vertex. 2 times 2 squared minus 8 times 2 plus 6, okay? 2 times 2 squared is 4, times 2 is 8, minus 16 plus 6, 8 minus 16 is negative 8, plus 6 is negative 2. So our vertex is at 2, negative 2. We can tell that by the manipulation. Find the y-intercept. Very simple on this one. Y-intercept is right here, right there. C is the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is at 0, 6. You can plot that, 0, 6. Because it's a parabola, we can reflect it. We get another point. And now we can finish this off. Find one more point. Pick something close to the axis of symmetry. I'm going to pick when x is equal to 1. And then to find the y-coordinate, you just plug and chug. If I plug it in, 2 times 1 squared is 2. 8 times 1 is 8, so it's 2 minus 8 plus 6. 2 minus 8 is negative 6, plus 6 is 0. So we got 1, 0. Plot that and reflect it, and then we can play a game of connect the dots. And there is a graph of our parabola. Right? So the steps are identify your coefficients, find your axis of symmetry, find your vertex, find your y-intercept, plot those. If you need another point, plug and chug, and then connect the dots. So let's look at another example. All right? So graph the function, label the vertex, and axis of symmetry. I'm going to start real quickly. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plot the y-intercept at -1. It's really simple. Just start with that. Then I'm going to look for my axis of symmetry. Okay, my axis of symmetry is going to be at negative b over 2 times a. A is 1, b is negative 2, and c is negative 1. So when I say negative b, it's going to be a double negative, so it'll be 2 over 2 times 1 is 2. So my axis of symmetry is at x equals 1. We will draw that out. And then I can reflect my y-intercept. I have another point. Let's plug and chug to find the vertex. Okay, I already know the x value of the vertex. I just need to find the y value. 1 squared is 1. 2 times 1 is 2. Minus 1. 1 minus 2 minus 1. 1 minus 2 is negative 1. Minus 1 more. Y equals negative 2. So my vertex is at 1, negative 2. And one more point should do it. I've got when x equals 0. I've got when x equals 1. I've got when x equals 2. Let's try when x equals 3. What's happening here? So I'll plug in 3. 3 squared is 9. 2 times 3 is 6. We got 9 minus 6 minus 1. 9 minus 6 is 3. 3 minus 1 is 2. So at 3, or at 3, y is 2. Plot and reflect, and then we can play connect the dots. There is our parabola. Another example for you. Pause it, try it, and then hit play again. All right, so we can see A is 2. B is 6, and C is 3. All right, real quickly, C is also my y-intercept. I'm going to plot that real quickly. Then I'm going to try and find my axis of symmetry. Very simple, negative b over 2a. B is 6, we got negative 6. A is 2, so 2 times 2 is 4. So x equals negative 3 halves, which is negative 1.5. So that's my axis of symmetry. All right, reflect, we have another point right there. Let's find our vertex. All right, our vertex, all we need to do is plug and chug. This one's a little less easy to do in our head. So we got 2 times negative 1.5 squared plus 6 times 1.5 plus 3. All right, so 2 times negative 1.5 squared. Remember, that's going to be positive because we're squaring it. Plus 6 times 1.5 plus 3, that brings us 16.5. So our vertex is at negative 1.5, 16.5, which is somewhere up here. Extend the graph. Then pick one more point. I think an easy point to pick would be if x equals 1. Then we can just plug in y equals 2 plus 6 plus 3. 2 plus 6. Oops, I see a mistake. Hope you guys see it too. This should be negative. I'll switch my vertex. That'll make my vertex negative 1.5. This would be a lot easier to work with. So right there is my vertex at negative 1.5. Negative 1.5. Don't forget to label your axis of symmetry. And then anyway, go back and finish our other point. That other point really helped me see that my mistake on the vertex, because I ended up getting a W shape as I was doing it But anyway, that gives me at x equals 1, y equals 11. That's right there. Reflect to get another point. And then we can kind of play our connect the dots. And there is our vertex and our parabola. All right, try this one. Work it out. Pause it. Okay. C is -1, so that is our y-intercept. Our axis of symmetry is -b, which would be 2 over 2 times 1, which is 2. So our axis of symmetry is at x equals 1. Our vertex, we'll plug 1 in. 1 squared, 1 minus 2 is -1, minus 1, -2. So our vertex is at 1, -2. Reflect your y-intercept to get another point. And try another x value just to make sure we don't have a funky shape here. Let's try x equals -1. -1 squared is 1. -2 times -1 plus 2. Minus 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. Minus 1 is 2. Reflect. And then we can play connect the dots. So in conclusion, standard form is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Our y-intercept, we can tell just by looking at it, is 0, c. A will tell us whether it opens up or down, how wide or narrow it is. Our axis of symmetry, x equals -b over 2a. And our vertex, we can find our vertex by doing a plug and chug with -b over 2a into our equation. Plot those, make sure to use your axis of symmetry for reflection, and then do one more point. Make sure you don't get a funky shape.